Let's walk through an example of how you and Stalliant work. I'd love to share the case study that you shared with me. Let's start at the top. Like, who is the customer? What problem did they come to you with? And then let's walk kind of step by step how you help them solve it and, what that after state looked like versus, when they came in originally.
Yeah. So one of the first clients that I got actually after going solo full time was a custom manufacturer in Middle America, Midwest America, and they had been acquired by a private equity firm. And this private equity firm installed a new COO, a young guy who was, you know, Harvard graduate, very, very smart, and he was there to be their head of operations. He came to me after a few months of being there, and his pain points were that he wanted to run the business, but he spent so much time, almost 50% of his time, just wrangling information together to get what he needed to run the business. So he was spending 50% of his time grabbing exports and doing VLOOKUPs and sum ifs. He actually taught himself Excel, which was excellent. But in the meantime, he had this huge output of 20, 30 tabs inside Excel just to make the sort of decisions that he should be making daily as COO. And so when we first spoke, it was actually just an information session. He just wanted to say, hey, is there anything I could be doing better? Can you take 15 minutes and tell me? And so we discussed pretty much exactly where I just said that every C-suite should start. Take a look at Power Query. Take a look at data models. Think about dimensional modeling. Think about traditional data engineering and data analytics concepts. And that really resonated. We were able to, just in the information session, I was able to show him sort of a proof of concept of what reporting might look like if he got the systems interconnected and if the data model was set up, and automatically that would have given him back 40 to 50% of his time. And they already knew that the information that he was using was very valuable. They were able to save 5 to 15% on any given job just because they could quote the job more accurately. Again, they're custom manufacturing, so their profit really depends on how accurately they can quote the job, uh, how how much visibility they have into cost of goods or labor. So they were able to get 5 to 15% on their bottom line on any given job just because they had insight into that. So they knew how valuable the information was. It was just so painful to get it. And so we started with Power Query. We started with the data model. We moved into technologies like Fabric and Azure for that data engineering piece, that data pipeline to connect to QuickBooks and move that information out of QuickBooks so that it could be usable. And after we were finished with that, it becomes really a very different. His role in the company transforms. So instead of being sort of a clerical role where he's wrangling all this information, he could actually be a bona fide head of operations and have an overview of what's going on in the business and make decisions accordingly. And the operation there, or the methodology that we use, is really the same across the board. And so they can then roll that up out to the rest of their portfolio. And as they evolve in their data journey and their quote unquote AI journey, they can start seeing reports across the entire portfolio. They can see, hey, here's this portfolio company compared to this portfolio company. And all that starts with these foundational processes of data engineering and data analytics. The end goal for them is to have a large language model system where they can feed it or get it set up actually inside of their data to ingest all of their purchase orders and their bills of material, all things that are very common inside of custom manufacturing and very, very time consuming. We want to put that all in the system, put a large language model or a small language model inside of that so that you can ask, hey, these are the criteria for an upcoming job. What is the ideal quote for that? And what kind of labor hours would we need for that? And if the model is trained properly, that is just an excellent use of large language models where it can synthesize all of this It doesn't necessarily have to be deterministic. It could it can be a conversation, and they can receive the information that they need to receive without just all of the hassle or the key person risk of one person who's been there forever needing to quote the job based on their intuition.
Right. And so, like the before state, you have this COO spending 50% of their time wrangling data. There's also some like key person risk because they're doing all these analyses in Excel, and maybe that Excel breaks or someone else doesn't know how to use it or they can't find it. Um, and then the after state is he's freed up all that time and he can spend his time being an operator, which presumably had some value benefits for the organization. Tell me like how the organization thought about that after state and sort of the return on this automation engagement.
Yeah, right away the automation saved them probably $500,000 a year, and that's not a number that I came up with. That's a number that the head of operations came up with. It saved right away if we just do the math on 50% of the time for head of operations. That's $100,000 a year, and then probably another $300,000 to $400,000 a year from the employees trying to figure out all of the Excel processes, and additional savings on because they were able to track vendor expenses. They were able to better mobilize their people so that they could do work in more efficiently, more efficient batches. The other thing that they were able to do was not just cut costs, but they were also able to increase top line revenue. And so we were able to do that by taking a look at the customers that they had. And once they could understand which customers were the most profitable and which had the most opportunities, they could continue to keep a relationship with those customers, keep those customers warm, keep coming back to them, and get repeat business from customers. So their customer acquisition cost goes down, their customer lifetime value goes up. And so aside from the cost savings, there's actually top line revenue increase, which is where we really want to be. It's really great when finance can cut costs. It's even better when finance can increase revenue.
Yeah. I would imagine that there was some skepticism within the organization before you implemented these changes. Tell me a little bit about that skepticism and what tactics or strategies converted them from skeptics into supporters.
Yeah, we had 2 points of skepticism. Let's call it resistance to change. The first was from the CEO of the business, who again was an owner of the business for several decades, and we ran into some pushback there, which we run into pretty often. Of sort of this is the way we've always done things. This is what's working for us. We were able to tackle that pretty effectively with the help of the head of operations because we were able to show side by side, hey, on this job, we tracked all our numbers compared to this similar job a year ago where we were not tracking these numbers. And we made a lot more on the job that we tracked the numbers on. And so the value proposition was there. Uh, once we got past the CEO and we submitted the project to the private equity firm, they were hesitant on the idea. They liked it, but they needed some reassurances because they had been burned in the past by the similar consultants. And so what they asked were 2 things. First of all, to start very, very small and create an MVP, create proof of concept before we could continue to move, especially because they are a growing company. They don't want to build a big system and then have to replace it all as they grow. And so that's very in the middle of the fairway for us. That's the way we love to operate. Give the finance department something that they can use, and we can build from there. We can build sort of in a modular, scalable way. The second piece that they were concerned about was accuracy, which rightly so, right? If they had a situation where they had a similar project done in a different portfolio company, but it turns out the numbers were overstated tremendously, and that was a nightmare scenario for them. And so they asked that anything that we do, we should triple check the accuracy. And that again is very middle of the fairway for us and highlights one of the risks of using AI or large language models inside the accounting and finance department, because there is a big risk of one input giving you one output and the same input giving you a second output. And there could be a lot of wires get crossed through using large language models. And so like I was saying, we start with the mature technologies. We start with the data engineering, the data modeling, using the systems that they already have. So they know that their data is pretty clean in QuickBooks. And we take it out of there using traditional data engineering. And so it stays very clean and very accurate throughout the entire project without the risk of overstatement or numbers that look off or disconnect to the business.